Hi friends, good morning. So today we will be starting off with our series on data protection. So we'll talk about multiple services comes under data protection, what it is and how we can protect our data. So let me just move on to first topic is data protection on AWS. That is where we'll focus in this series. We'll talk about services on AWS. So let me just start off with the agenda. So agenda for this session is basically to know how customers view their data protection, overview of data protection services portfolio, security assurance, and putting it all together. Let's get started. So first of all, I would like to uh, discuss about how customers view their data protection and privacy. So in the field, what we see organization, those who face unique data protection and sovereignty risk and challenges. So nowadays, what is happening? Everyone moving to the cloud. However, the information about how to secure and protect their data on the cloud is still something that people are looking forward to learn and grow with that. However, things are changing so fast that we are not getting enough time to understand and match the pace. So, in their shift to cloud, companies across all industries and sectors are confronting range of familiar and emerging data privacy issues. Like number one, evolving regulatory requirements. As we are bringing in new services, we're bringing in new platforms, new providers. So the regulatory requirements are evolving. Requirements that vary significantly across region. So for the customers who are in different geographies, customers who are in different regions have faced different regulatory requirements and the regulatory bodies. Highly dynamic security and privacy threat landscape. Now, this threat landscape is so dynamic from security and privacy perspective that people don't know actually how soon they are relevant or I mean till what time they'll remain relevant. So that is one other thing which is troubling companies to become familiar with things. Stringent reporting and documentation requirement. So this is for all our auditors. Please don't be so strict and stringent for organizations. I guess this is one of the major pain points for major or most of the organization I've seen in my career, that the documentation and reporting is something auditor asks and then you run around, check different stuff, try to fetch information. And last but not the least, this is the major thing. That is why we are doing this series, to make you understand what all services are there, how you can use them, what are benefits you're going to get. So limited cloud knowledge and specialists. So this is the major gap in the industry. People are not that aware about cloud, and you hardly find candidates with good knowledge on the cloud. So that is why we started off this series, so that I can make you understand what data protection is, not only data protection but other security related topics as well. But for this series, we'll focus on data protection. So these are the common challenges which industry is facing. Now let me just move forward and see what are the drivers for data protection technology. Customer wants to know, how do I keep my data confidential? That's where it is important to have encryption in place. How do I know that my data and resources are trustworthy? You need to have some sort of mechanism of authenticating and make sure the integrity of the data is maintained throughout the life cycle. How do I control and manage sensitive data? That's where data privacy comes into the picture, because nowadays there are a lot of laws against privacy in India also. DPDPA is now prevalent, though the rules are still awaited. But by the time I'm creating this video, I think rules are not there, but still uh, we have prospective Data Protection Act coming in place. Then security assurance, that's also very important piece. It actually helps you when you move on to cloud. This security assurance, now cloud is something, some cloud service provider like Azure, AWS, or Google, all of them basically are also following some level or enormous level of compliance, not some. So they are actually, I'll talk about that as well in the upcoming slides. So how do I prove security and compliance to auditor? Because you are part of cloud, or you are actually putting on your workloads to cloud. So we'll talk about this uh, aspect as well. So if I move forward, there are four customer needs from data protection services. These are the only thing which you need to know, basics of data protection. You need to understand what it is and how you can protect your data in different level. So data at rest is storage encryption. Data in transit, the network encryption. Application credentials, manage secret. Lifecycle management is the automation for all three, just to maintain and make sure security is easy and reduce human errors. That's why automation helps. So now when we talk about data at rest, like suppose your data is stored in the database or a share where you can easily encrypt the data where it resides. Now data in transit, everybody understand, it's self-explanatory. Data is moving over the wire from one server to another. Encrypt the data as it moves between networks and enforce data sovereignty. To give you an example, there are some countries through which if your data is passing, they need to have some sort of encryption level to be maintained till the time data moves across that zone. So that is also something to maintain data sovereignty. And you don't want other people's to actually intercept your data and read through that. So you want on the network, data should be encrypted. So TLS is the technology which is used to encrypt the data. We'll talk about TLS, what it is, in upcoming sessions. However, let's move on to the next and very important part, where normally I've seen a lot of breaches happen because application credentials, the credentials which you are using on your accounts, are getting leaked. So you need to encrypt the secrets. See, key to the kingdom, if that is being lost, no point of putting so many locks and keeping guards who are actually bribed by somebody. So in order to maintain that and manage the secrecy of those credentials, there are services which are used. It could be different. However, I will move on to the next point. Now, out of all these three are the major things, but we have one more thing called confidential computing. I'm not talking about that right now. So let me just do that life cycle management of these all these three things, how you can automate stuff so that it won't affect you, or you don't have to involve any human in between. I said humor. Yeah, humor is important. So customer don't want day-to-day management of for cryptography and preventive controls. So that is the most important thing you need to keep in mind. Moving forward, that is what will be the game changer. Let's move on to the next. We'll talk about AWS data protection services portfolio. We'll think from all the perspective. So data protection drives better business outcome. And nowadays, yes, for sure, because there are a lot of privacy uh, laws coming into the picture. Like in Europe, there is GDPR. In India, also DPDPA is coming in. And also, if the data gets leaked, what it is, I mean, why attacker will attack you? It's just because he wants to get data, information, knowledge, what you have gathered. Maybe could be intellectual property rights or for a pharmaceutical, how they make the drug, some trade secret, some secret sauce recipe. That is what is being stored. So I'm just giving you one example about that. Apart from that, there could be customer information. You know your clients, you know your customers, their information is stored in your database. If somebody gets hold of it, they can reach out to them, or they can bribe them, or whatever misuse they can do. I'm not saying exactly the bribe thing, but maybe uh, some other mechanism they'll choose. Automate tasks to save time and reduce risk. That's also something you want to achieve, right? I was talking about the human error. That is the weakest link in security. So you want to automate most of the tasks and reduce the risk. Scale and visibility and control as your business grows. Now, if you want to scale it, you need to have the visibility and control as well, right? Your business is growing. You need to have visibility. What all changes happening? Where I'm lacking? What all things are not in place? I need to know what are the risks. Ease of use, integration with hundreds of AWS services. That's also very important. So, I mean, from AWS perspective, I'm talking about if you are on AWS and you have multiple services, workloads hosted on AWS, you can use AWS native services to protect your data. Inherit global security and compliance control. That is also a very important thing that AWS is maintaining. Uh, Not only in India, but outside India in different regions also, they have to abide by the law and they have to maintain those compliance controls. Let's move on to the services. What all services do we have in AWS? We have AWS Key Management Service, we have AWS Cloud HSM, Certificate Manager, Private Certificate Authority, and Secrets Manager. Now, you all understand key management services, managing the key for the encryption of the data. Cloud HSM is dedicated hardware, I would say, like HSMs you have on premises. You can use Cloud HSM. It's expensive, but certain companies need that in order to store their data. Store the keys, sorry, not the data. Certificate Manager and the Private Certificate Authority for the TLS certification. uh, Data in transit I was talking about. So to store certificate, rotate, manage, uh, generate certificates, you can use Certificate Manager. We'll talk about all these services in our upcoming sessions. AWS Secrets Manager, that's also very important, where you can store your API keys, your credentials, uh, your secret strings, your OAuth tokens. So all those things you can store in Secrets Manager. It's just like a vault. I'll talk and I'll show you a demo in upcoming session. So, wow. Now let's move on to the next slide where I'll be talking about how does AWS help customers with data protection. So there are services and how you can utilize those services to protect your data. How do we move our data to AWS securely. That's securely moving data to the cloud. That's first part of migration. When you have your data on premises and you want to move on to cloud, first thing you want to consider is to move the data. There are two options. First is you can do a client side encryption, encrypt the data at your on premise, at your location, and then send the data. That's one way. Another one is you use AWS Certificate Manager for SSL and TLS certificate. You encrypt the data over the wire. So when the data starts, it's established. The TLS will establish a encrypted tunnel through which data will transfer. How do we keep data on AWS confidential? Now, first thing was to transfer the data to the cloud. Second thing is you want to store data on cloud with confidentiality parameter ticked off. Now, from the perspective of S3 or database, you have different services. That's server-side encryption at rest. So now, either what you can do is you store the data. I'll give you a very simple example. You move data on S3. You enable encryption on S3. Default encryption, no problem. You enable encryption, so when the data comes onto S3, it gets encrypted automatically. Service used, key management service, cloud HSA, based on the FIPS 140 validated level. So what level does your organization want? Though, just to inform you, AWS KMS is also now FIPS 142 level 3. If you don't know what FIPS is, basically it's just a compliance standard which governs. We'll talk about that in upcoming sessions when I'll be talking about KMS. We can talk about this in detail. How do we securely share data and resources within cloud? Now, first thing is you want to move data to the cloud. Second is you want to keep data on the cloud with security. Now, if you want to share across accounts, authenticate and integrate, or maintaining the integrity, that is where identity and access management comes into the picture. How do we manage authentication and authorization? That's the service. We have IAM and secrets manager, just to store your secrets and keep it securely. How do I prove and compliance to auditor? I mean, just security and compliance to auditor. There are services. Yeah, AWS have services which can help you prove your auditor that yes, your data is secure, confidential, authenticated, integrity is being maintained. So all these things you can show with different services. Now, how to optimize cost and performance, how do we architect for availability, how do we scale. This is all there on internet, public articles. If you go to well architected guidance available in all region, our services used by all other AWS services, cryptographic SDKs, multi-region keys for disaster recovery. So all these things are available. You can go and check on the public documentation. All right, let's come to the point where security assurance and provable data is fairly important. Now, assurance and provable data protection. That's very important point. As I told you, this is something which I was discussing in the previous slide. I was talking about services AWS have, which can help you prove to your auditor that your data is not only protected but also being governed and managed. So notify me if my desired encryption settings are modified. There is a service called AWS config. You can utilize manage rules to monitor encryption configuration changes in your AWS environment. There are some examples which you can see on the slide. Is S3 bucket server-side encryption enabled or not. If this server-side encryption is not enabled, it or it's been modified, config can actually send you alert. How it will send, we can talk about this later. However, the service is there. S3 bucket SSL request only SSL request will be catered by S3 bucket. If this configuration you have done and it's been modified, CloudTrail encryption enabled or not. That's also very important thing which you need to understand from the perspective that if CloudTrail, somebody is disabling a CloudTrail or somebody is moving your environment from secure to unsecure, that's where config is very important service. Monitor usage of ACM certificates and KMS keys. That's something which AWS CloudTrail will do. You have questions like CVI, what, when, why, how. All these answers can be provided by AWS CloudTrail to create detailed log for API calls. I know everybody knows cloud is just API calls you make to your CSP. So all these API calls are rotated, or I mean, all these API calls are made to the cloud, which are getting recorded in CloudTrail. So for example, KMS API action was called by who, which user ID, account, IP, timestamp, where and why, which KMS key, which AWS resource is being accessed. You can take all this information from CloudTrail. Another service is audit, which is an important lifecycle event for certificates and KMS key. So you can use AWS CloudWatch metrics and events to monitor important event and API calls in your AWS environment. Metrics like time until key and certificate expiration. Normally on-premise environment, you have to create alerts and you have to have some sort of alerting mechanism for these keys expirations and certificate expiration. Key rotation, key deletion, imported key expiration, and certificate renewal. All these events can be automated through Lambda with Event Bridge. Can be done that through this. So that's also another important service which you should keep in mind. So another point on data protection is AWS data privacy and security differentiation. So how it happens for AWS, I'm talking about customers choose the AWS region in which their content is stored and the type of storage to comply with data sovereignty regulation. Yeah, in AWS you can, although you can choose that in other cloud platforms also. However, AWS, you can choose this. Security, customer choose how their content is secured. AWS uses FIF 140 validated HSMs for storing cryptographic key material, NIST standardized cryptographic primitives, algorithms, and schemes. Now, from access, AWS prohibits, and our systems are designed to prevent remote access by AWS personnel to customer data for any purpose for that matter, including service maintenance, unless access is requested by customer, is required to prevent fraud and abuse or to comply with law. Only in that case, AWS will access the data. Disclosure of customer content. AWS will not disclose customer content unless we were required to do so, comply with the law or binding order of a government body. That's in the Cloud Act is been defined. So this is something which AWS is also following. They will not disclose your data to anybody unless it's been asked by law. Security assurance, as I told you that there are multiple services, but from AWS security protection and control processes are independently validated by multiple third-party independent assessment bodies. There are 2,500 security controls audited each year. So I'll just show you the list of third-party validations what AWS have, and that's why it's one of the most preferred cloud service provider. What's next, guys? In this series, what we will do is we will talk about the services. We will talk about cloud HSM. We'll talk about certificate manager, secrets manager. I'll deliver the session as well as I'll show you a hands-on lab where I can give you a demo of the services and how you can create keys and certificates and secret manager, how you can store, retrieve, and manage the keys. Thank you for today. We'll connect back in our next session on specific services. Thank you.